A kind-hearted waitress paid for an old man's coffee, never imagining he was a billionaire, quietly searching for his future wife. The downtown cafe was alive with morning energy as rain tapped steadily against the wide windows, turning the view of the city into a blur. The cozy smell of freshly brewed coffee blended with the damp scent of rain-soaked pavement, wrapping the cafe in a warm, inviting atmosphere. People sat chatting and sipping their drinks, the clinking of cups adding to the soft hum of voices, when suddenly the door swung open, letting in a burst of cold air. A man in his early 50s stepped inside. His old, worn-out coat was soaked, and his scuffed shoes left wet prints across the shiny floor. His damp salt-and-pepper hair clung to his forehead, and his tired eyes told a silent story of struggles long faced. He moved toward the counter, unsure, his eyes quickly scanning the menu before resting on the young barista at the register. In a low, quiet voice, he asked for a plain black coffee. As the barista rang up the order, the man began patting his pockets, his hands growing more frantic by the second as he searched. His face turned pale, and he swallowed hard before speaking again, his voice tight with shame. I'm sorry," he said, stumbling over his words. "I think I left my wallet at home. If it's okay, could I just sit here for a bit until the rain stops?" The barista, a sharp-jawed young man with an even sharper attitude, crossed his arms and raised his voice, drawing the eyes of nearby customers. "Look, buddy," he said with a smirk, "this isn't a shelter. We don't hand out free drinks to people who can't pay. No money, no stay." The man's face turned bright red. He stepped back, eyes on the floor. "I wasn't asking for a free drink," he said softly. "Just a place to stay dry for a while." A cruel laugh came from a nearby table where a group of sharply dressed customers watched. "Can you believe this?" one scoffed. "Walking into a cafe with no money and expecting service?" "Times must really be tough if beggars think they belong in coffee shops," another added, their voice full of mockery. The man's shoulders drooped as he turned toward the door, humiliation heavy in his every step. From across the room, Emma, a 29-year-old waitress with auburn hair tied loosely back, watched it all, her usually warm hazel eyes now blazing with anger. Balancing a tray of empty cups and dishes, she pushed through the crowded cafe and set the tray down with a sharp clink on the counter. She reached into her uniform pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, and laid it firmly on the counter. "That's enough," she said, her voice strong and clear, slicing through the rising chatter. The barista's grin faded. "Emma, what are you doing?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "You don't have to pay for this guy. He can't just come in here and expect a free ride." Emma glanced around at the staring customers, her face calm and steady. "I'm paying for his coffee," she said plainly. "Not because I feel sorry for him, but because I know what it's like to be judged for not having enough." A mocking laugh rang out from the corner. "How sweet," a man jeered. "The waitress playing hero, hoping he'll leave you a big tip later?" Emma turned to face them, standing tall, her voice full of quiet power. "Kindness isn't a deal," she said. "It doesn't cost us anything to care. But mocking others? That shows how small we really are." The cafe went quiet. The earlier snickers and whispers gave way to a stillness thick with reflection. Emma looked back at the man and smiled gently. "Please, have a seat," she said warmly. "I'll bring your coffee over in a minute. Don't let the cruel words of others make you forget your worth." The man met her eyes, his own shining with tears he hadn't yet let fall, and nodded. He sat by the window, where rain continued to stream down the glass. As Emma prepared his drink, the mood in the cafe shifted. People looked away, no longer eager to meet her eyes. The judgment in the air had been replaced by a heavy silence. And in that small, brave moment, Emma, despite her modest life and the harsh words around her, stood tall in her kindness. And the man, once dismissed and embarrassed, found peace in the simple act of being seen. and valued. Later, as Emma cleared the last table of her shift, the memory still echoed in her heart. No one had said a word to her since, but the stares, the whispers, and the quiet hung in the air like smoke. The next morning, her manager, Brian, called her into the office. The little room reeked of burnt coffee and bleach. "Close the door," he said. Emma did. Brian folded his arms. "This is a business, Emma, not your personal charity." She said nothing. "You don't get to decide who gets freebies," he went on. "If you want to play Mother Teresa, do it on your own time." "I paid for it," she replied calmly. "That's not the point," he snapped. "You embarrassed your coworker and made our customers uncomfortable." Emma held his gaze. He embarrassed himself. Brian's voice turned sharp. "Watch yourself. You're here to serve, not give speeches." There was a pause. "Can I go?" she asked. "Get out, and remember your place." Back in the kitchen, Marcy and Josh stood by the sink. They fell quiet when she walked in. As she passed, Marcy muttered just loud enough, "Must be nice, playing saint while still splitting rent with your kid sister." Josh chuckled. "Bet it comes with tips." She couldn't stop wondering, was he secretly rich? Emma said nothing. She grabbed her coat, signed out, and stepped into the soft drizzle outside. The air was thick with the smell of wet pavement and faint city smoke. She didn't hurry home. The apartment she shared with her sister Lily was small, a one-bedroom with chipped paint and a cold draft sneaking in through the window. Lily lay curled up on the couch, shivering beneath a worn blanket. "Hey," Emma whispered gently, brushing a hand across her sister's forehead. "You're late," Lily mumbled. Emma smiled. "Got caught in the rain." She warmed up leftover porridge, added a bit of salt, and handed it to Lily. Then she checked her wallet. $3, one subway token, and an old photo of their mom, edges faded. She stared at the money, folded it slowly, and slid it back into place. No regret. Not for the coffee. Not for any of it. After Lily fell asleep, Emma sat by the window, watching the rain trail down the glass. Her own reflection looked back, pale, tired, but with a quiet kind of strength still glowing underneath. Her thoughts drifted back. 15 years, maybe. She was just a kid when their mother collapsed in a crowded street market. People kept walking. No one stopped. No one. Except one woman. An elderly lady in a worn skirt had knelt beside them, offering a small bottle of water and wrapping a shawl around Emma's shoulders. Emma never knew her name, but she never forgot that kindness. That moment had become a promise. So when she saw the man in the cafe, drenched, ashamed, invisible, there was no question. She just acted. The judgment didn't matter. She mattered. That night, before turning off the light, she whispered into the dark, for no one but herself, "I'd rather be mocked for doing what's right than praised for staying silent." And in that little apartment, where there was nothing extra to give, except her own dignity, Emma felt something rare. Peace. It had been 4 days since the cafe incident. 4 long shifts filled with barely there whispers and glances that hung too long. Emma had gotten used to being invisible. But now she was visible. For something she hadn't asked for. And somehow, the stares felt heavier than silence ever had. That morning, the cafe buzzed as usual, cups clinking, steam hissing, soft voices rising and falling. Emma moved from table to table, wiping crumbs, stacking plates, offering kind, polite smiles. Then the doorbell chimed. She didn't look up at first, but something in the air changed. It held still, and curiosity tugged at her. She glanced toward the door. A tall man had entered. He wore a sharp charcoal suit and a silk scarf. His salt and pepper hair was neat, his polished shoes tapping lightly on the floor. He looked like he belonged in a skyscraper's boardroom, not a small cafe like this. But there was something familiar, something unmistakable in his eyes. Emma froze. He didn't head to the counter. Instead, he walked to the table by the window, the same seat where the soaked, humiliated man had once sat, and took it silently. Emma's hand clenched the cloth she held. Her heart began to pound. She walked over, menu in hand, unsure whether to pretend or speak the truth aloud. Before she could say anything, he looked up. "I'm not here to order." She paused. "I only have one question," he said. "Why did you help me?" Emma blinked. I just couldn't watch it happen." "You didn't know me. You had nothing to gain." She hesitated. "You didn't look like someone asking for a handout. You looked like someone being made to feel small. And I know that feeling." She slowly sat across from him, setting the menu aside. "When I was 17, my mom collapsed in a market. No one helped. They walked around her like she was in the way, like she didn't matter. Except one woman, an old lady who didn't have much herself. She stayed with us. And I made a promise that day. If I ever had the chance, I'd be like her." He didn't speak. He just listened. "That day at the cafe," Emma said softly, "I remembered that promise." A quiet pause passed between them. Then he asked, "Do you read?" Emma blinked. "Books?" He nodded. "I used to. Not much lately. I liked stories about ordinary people doing brave things." He smiled gently. "Good choice." They started talking. About books, cities, music. About Bach, Chopin, and why people sometimes grow cruel when they feel powerless. He mentioned authors Emma hadn't read, but she didn't fake it. She asked with honest curiosity. Minutes passed, then more. The background noise of the cafe faded into a soft hum. At one point, Emma laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in days. "You're not what I expected," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She shrugged. "Someone who just wanted to say thank you and disappear?" He looked down, then met her gaze again. "I've had money for a long time," he said, "but very few people have made me feel human again. That day, you did." Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, they weren't Waitress and Billionaire. Not a stranger and a savior. Just two people. Two souls finally seen. And neither would forget it. Exactly 1 week after their second meeting, Emma received an envelope. No return address. No name. Just a thick ivory card inside, embossed in gold with a symbol she recognized at once. The Annesley. A 5-star hotel in the heart of the city, known for hosting presidents, not waitresses from corner cafes. Her name was printed across the top. Emma L. Bennett, guest of Charles H. Everlyn. She stared at it, the afternoon light catching the gold seal like a secret daring her to open it. She almost didn't go. But curiosity, mixed with a strange tightness in her chest, led her to the hotel lobby 3 days later. She wore her only nice blouse, borrowed shoes, her hair pinned up, hands slightly shaking. When she stepped through the tall, revolving doors, it felt like stepping into another world. Polished marble floors, chandeliers that sparkled like starlight, and people who walked like they belonged. With quiet confidence masking her nerves, she stepped up to the front desk. Her voice trembled slightly. "Emma Bennett, I believe I have a meeting." The concierge nodded as if he'd been expecting her, then pointed her toward a private lounge on the 21st floor. "Mr. Everlyn will join you shortly." Mr. Everlyn. She rode the elevator in silence, her heart thudding with each passing floor. The lounge was silent and elegant, Rich leather chairs, soft jazz playing from unseen speakers, and tall windows that looked out over the entire city like a throne room in the clouds. She stood by the glass, unsure if she belonged anywhere near this kind of place. Then the door opened behind her. She turned and saw Charles. But he wasn't the man from the cafe. Not even the polished version from days ago. This Charles wore his presence like a perfectly tailored suit. Two assistants flanked him at first, but they slipped away quietly as he entered. He moved with a calm, commanding air. He didn't need attention, he simply had it. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth and low. "Thank you for coming." She tried to smile, but her voice wavered. "This isn't exactly a coffee shop." He smiled slightly and motioned to a nearby table, already set with tea, fruit, and an untouched espresso. "Please," he said, "have a seat." She did, still unsure if she was being welcomed or quietly evaluated. He sat across from her, folding his hands. "I wanted to speak with you in person," he began. "Anything less would feel dishonest." She waited. "My name," he said, "is Charles H. Everlyn. I'm the founder of Everlyn Holdings. We work in 12 countries, mostly in infrastructure and social impact investments." Emma blinked, her mouth half open, but no words came out. "I wasn't pretending to be someone else," he added quickly. "But yes, that day at the cafe, I dressed down. And I didn't bring my wallet on purpose. I needed to see what people would notice when there was nothing to gain." Emma stared at the tea in front of her, hoping for clarity in the steam. "My wife died 15 years ago," he said, his voice softening. "Cancer. It was sudden. We never had children. After that, I lost trust. I stopped believing in real kindness. So I began to travel, quietly. Not just to see the world, but to see if there was still heart in it." He looked her in the eyes. "That day, I found someone." Emma's throat tightened. She couldn't tell if she felt honored or tricked. "You set me up?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," he said gently. "I didn't ask you for anything. I didn't even speak to you. I simply watched. And you chose." She shook her head slowly. "I don't know whether to feel grateful or used." "I understand that," he said quietly. "I do." Emma stood abruptly, her chair making a soft scraping sound on the rug. "So what now?" she asked. "You tell me I passed your little morality test, and then what? You write me a check? Offer me a job? A car?" Charles didn't even flinch. "I offer you nothing," he said calmly. "Unless you want to hear the rest." Emma's breath hitched. Her thoughts were tangled. Shock, anger, awe, uncertainty, all swirling inside her. He stood too and walked to the window, his hands folded behind his back. "I wasn't testing you, Emma," he said again. "I was searching for something I thought the world had lost. And maybe someone who could remind me what it means to be seen. Not as a billionaire, not as a burden, just as a man." She watched him, saying nothing. "I don't want to buy your gratitude," he added. "But I would like to know. Would you have a coffee with me again? No expectations, no pretending." Emma looked at him, not at the expensive suit or the elegant lounge or the city skyline. She looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had once stared down in shame, holding a soaked coat, asking just to stay dry. That man was still this man. And somehow, that mattered more than anything. She let out a slow breath. "I don't know what this is," she said softly, "or what you think it might become. But I know who I am. Charles turned toward her, something quiet and searching in his expression. And who is that? He asked. She smiled, a small, honest smile. Someone who didn't do it to be seen, and someone who isn't afraid to walk away, if that's all this turns out to be. He nodded. The corners of his mouth lifted. That's what makes you different. And for the first time, Emma realized this wasn't a test. It was an invitation, not into wealth, but into something much rarer, to be seen, to be remembered, not for who you impress, but for who you choose to be when no one's watching. Emma didn't expect to hear from Charles again. She figured their last conversation at the hotel had been the end of something strange, surreal, a moment outside of her usual life, a window she'd peeked through, but would never step beyond. But the next afternoon, another envelope arrived. No gold seal, just her name, handwritten with care. Inside was a short note, in the same neat script. Emma, I'm heading to Montreal next week. I visit every year. It's quieter there. Peaceful. I'd like you to come. Not for business, not for formality. Just company. Conversation. No expectations. Only a sincere invitation. Charles tucked inside was a round-trip train ticket. Emma held it in her hand for a long time. That evening, standing in their cramped kitchen, she stared at the pot of rice boiling on the stove. Lily was curled on the couch nearby, coughing gently between sips of tea. "You're quiet," Lily said. Emma gave a faint smile. "That's rare, huh?" Lily tilted her head. "You thinking about him?" Emma nodded. She told Lily everything, the envelope, the note, the ticket, how it made her feel, like a door had opened, one she'd never dared to knock on before. "I'm not sure I belong in his world," she admitted. "What if I mess up? What if it changes the way I see myself, or the way he sees me?" Lily studied her sister for a moment. Then she said something Emma would never forget. "You've spent your whole life making space for others. Maybe it's time you saw what it feels like when someone makes space for you." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the soft patter of rain on the window pane, the hum of city buses passing below, the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Her mind wandered. She thought of the cafe, the laughter, the sneers, the judgment. She thought of Charles's eyes, gentle, searching, human. And she thought of her mother, who used to say, "Don't wait for life to find you. Sometimes, you've got to go find it yourself." By sunrise, Emma had made her decision. She packed lightly, a single bag, her worn journal, 2 changes of clothes, and the book she'd been too tired to finish for months. She left Lily a note on the fridge, tucked some grocery money underneath, and gave her sister a hug that lingered longer than usual. At the train station, she stood on the platform, her heart balancing between fear and hope. When the train pulled in and the doors opened with a gentle hiss, she stepped forward. Not into luxury, not into fantasy, but into the unknown. Charles was waiting in the cabin. No assistants, no cameras. Just him, seated by the window, a book in his hands, 2 coffees on the table. He looked up as she entered and smiled. Not the polished smile of someone used to being admired, but something warmer, something real. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Emma sat down across from him, setting her bag gently at her feet. "I didn't think I would either," she replied. "But then I remembered, the world doesn't change unless you walk into it." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm not offering anything," he said. "No promises, no golden paths. I just thought, maybe it's time I stopped walking alone." Emma turned to the window as the city blurred, buildings giving way to trees, and the train's soft rhythm settling into her chest like a heartbeat. She looked back at him. "Maybe," she said, "we both needed someone to remind us that we're still allowed to choose something different." And with that, the train carried them forward, two unlikely travelers, connected not by fate, but by choice. Emma didn't know where the journey would take her, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the answer. Because she wasn't chasing escape, or wealth, or fairy tales. She was walking into something honest. And somehow, that was enough. The days that followed were unlike anything Emma had ever known. No five-star hotels, no yachts, no champagne brunches. Instead, she woke up in quiet villages and dusty towns. They stayed in humble guest houses and local centers, riding through winding roads in the back of Charles's old Jeep, the windows down, the wind dancing in her hair. He didn't live like the billionaire the world imagined him to be. They visited orphanages in small cities, where children ran to Charles with open arms, calling his name. Not because he gave them toys, but because he remembered their birthdays, their favorite books, their silly inside jokes. They went to shelters for people in recovery. Charles didn't say much there, but he listened. Fully. They shared soup on unfinished porches of homes half-built by funds he'd quietly donated. Homes where no one knew he owned half the city skyline. Emma watched it all in quiet awe. He never announced himself, never asked for praise. One afternoon, while sorting food boxes in a Vermont pantry, she finally asked, "Why don't you tell people who you are?" He shrugged. "Because they'd stop talking to me like I'm human." Everywhere they went, his eyes looked, not for gratitude, but for connection. And more than once, Emma caught her own reflection in a dusty window, smiling, really smiling, in a way she hadn't in years. One night, tucked away in a small cabin near the edge of a forest in Quebec, they sat outside on the porch. Crickets sang in the dark. The air smelled of pine. A single lantern flickered between them on the wooden table. Charles had made chamomile tea. Emma curled beneath a wool blanket, watching the steam rise from her mug. They hadn't spoken for a while. But it wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind of quiet that feels like breathing together. Finally, Charles leaned back, gazing into the trees. "I've had people offer me everything," he said softly. "Comfort, even love." He paused, then turned to her, his voice lower now. "But I don't need someone to love me. I need someone who understands why I love the things I do, someone who doesn't need to be dazzled, just present." Emma didn't answer right away. She let his words sit there, tender, uncertain. Then, slowly, she looked at him. Her eyes shimmered with lantern light, and something deeper. "I don't know if I'm that person," she admitted. "I don't know if I understand all the reasons why you are who you are." She took a breath. "But I do know this. I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you." Charles didn't grin. He didn't look victorious. He just looked peaceful, as if he'd finally heard the answer to a question he didn't realize he'd been asking. They didn't reach for each other's hands. They didn't lean in for anything more. Because what they shared wasn't about closeness. It was about recognition. About two people from different worlds, carrying different wounds, and finding quiet harmony in the space between them. Later that night, Emma sat by the cabin window, writing in her journal. Her thoughts came in half-phrases, scattered words. Quiet, found, seen. She closed the book, slid it under her pillow, and whispered into the stillness, "I didn't come looking for love, but maybe I stumbled into something braver." Outside, the stars blinked softly above, silent witnesses to a story still being written. Not a fairy tale. Not fate. Two souls who once believed they were alone, until they weren't. 3 months. 3 months of quiet mornings and unhurried talks, of listening more than speaking, of seeing the world not from penthouse windows but from front stoops and busy community centers. Emma had changed, but not in the way people might expect. She wasn't richer. She didn't wear new clothes. Her shoes were still worn at the edges, her journal still filled with messy thoughts and dog-eared pages. But her spirit, that had shifted. She walked taller, spoke more calmly, and no longer felt the need to prove her worth to anyone. Charles noticed it too. They had just returned from visiting a women's shelter in Detroit when he asked to speak with her alone. They sat on the rooftop of an old church they were helping restore, the city skyline glowing in the distance. He handed her a plain folder. No ribbon, no big reveal. Inside were documents to start a foundation in her name, the Emma Bennett Opportunity Fund. She looked up slowly. "I want to leave something behind," he said, "but not in my name. I've done enough of that. I want the next girl, the one waiting tables, caring for her sister, thinking no one sees her. I want her to know that someone did." Emma didn't say anything at first. Charles went on gently. "You don't have to run it. You don't even have to be involved. But it'll exist. Because you do. Because one person chose to see someone, not for what they had, but for who they were." Emma rested her fingers on the folder, her touch light. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to," Charles said. But she did. She took a steady breath. "I'm honored," she said, her voice clear. "More than I can say. But if it's okay, I'd like to try something else." He nodded, open. "I want to build something on my own," she told him. "It doesn't need to carry my name, or yours. I want to start from the ground up. Not because I don't value what you're offering, but because someone once believed in me enough to let me believe in myself." Her voice didn't shake. "And I want to give that same belief to others, not through money, but by showing up, by listening, by being there, when no one else is." Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, not with surprise, but with quiet, glowing pride. As if he'd always known this moment would come. "You already have," he said. Emma looked at him, the man who once sat, soaked and ashamed in a cafe, the man who had become her mirror, her mentor, her friend. There was no name for what they were, not lovers, not business partners, not family, but something deeper, a shared truth. A quiet recognition that didn't need a label. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "No matter what you do," he said softly, "I'll be in your corner. Always." She nodded, eyes glassy with emotion. And in that moment, nothing more needed to be said. Their story had never been about grand speeches. It was built on quiet choices, patient belief, and the courage to let each other go, not because of loss, but because of trust. They stayed there until the sun dipped behind the buildings, long golden shadows stretching across a city that was no longer just a place. It was a promise, that kindness, when given freely, always finds its way home, and that sometimes the truest form of love is letting someone walk their own path, knowing they carry a piece of you with every step. The rain had returned, soft and steady, as the final letters were placed on the cafe window. The first cup. Emma stood across the street, umbrella in hand, watching her dream become real. This wasn't just a cafe. It was the cafe. The place where everything began, where a man once stood, soaked and ashamed, for forgetting his wallet, and where she, a tired waitress with little to give, had offered $5 and unknowingly rewritten her life. Now the space was hers. But more importantly, it belonged to everyone. She had rebuilt it herself, painted the walls, refinished the floors, changed the lights. With help from volunteers, small donors, and quiet support from someone who never asked for thanks. Etched beneath the logo on the window was her motto, "No one should have to earn kindness." Inside, the cafe glowed with life. Warm lights, soft jazz, books on shelves, gentle conversations. A chalkboard near the counter didn't list prices. It read, "Your first cup is on us. Your second, if you can, on someone else." A piano waited in the corner for the afternoon trio. The tables weren't marked by numbers, but by handwritten words. Hope, trust, begin. Emma stood by the window, watching people flow in. An exhausted nurse, a delivery driver, a mother with 2 children. It was a space for rest, for dignity. Then the door opened. A man stepped in, older, hunched, soaked from the rain. His hands trembled slightly as he held the door. He looked unsure, almost ashamed. A young barista stepped forward. "Sir, this place is for customers only. If you don't have—" But Emma was already moving. She laid a gentle hand on the barista's shoulder. "It's all right," she said softly. Then she turned to the man. "Would you like a seat by the window?" He nodded, relieved. She smiled. "And what would you like today?" "Just something warm," he murmured. "To sit for a bit. It's been a long morning." Emma's voice softened even more. "Then let's make it longer, with a little peace." She glanced at the barista. "Here, the first cup is always on us. No questions, no shame." The man nodded, his eyes wide. Lesson learned. As Emma walked toward the back, something pulled at her. She turned to the window, and there he was. Charles. Standing across the street, umbrella in hand, collar pulled up, face calm, eyes warm. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. He didn't come inside. Just watched. She met his gaze, and in that quiet, lingering moment, something passed between them. Gratitude, farewell, and something more. A promise. He gave her a small nod, then turned and disappeared into the rain. Later, during the soft opening, Emma stood beside the piano, a microphone in one hand, a warm cup in the other. She looked around the cafe. Every seat was full, the air wrapped in the kind of comfort that only comes from feeling seen. "Years ago," she began, her voice steady, "I paid for someone's coffee. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone being made small, and I couldn't look away." She paused. "That cup cost me $5, but what it gave me was a whole new way to see the world." Some people nodded. Others wiped at their eyes. "I thought I was helping a man who was lost," she said softly. "But in truth, he helped me find the version of myself I didn't know I was allowed to become." She set the cup down gently. "This cafe isn't about selling coffee. It's about presence, about showing up when no one else does." Her voice dropped, warm and full. "A man once told me, kindness doesn't need to be remembered. It only needs to be continued." She smiled. "So that's what we're doing here, one cup at a time." And almost like a whisper, she added, "Some loves don't need romance. Some lives are changed by nothing more than a kind gesture, and the courage to mean it." Applause filled the room. A saxophone began to play in the corner, And somewhere in the back, a first cup was poured for someone who didn't know they needed it until they did. And so, it began again. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey, one that started with a single act of kindness and unfolded into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Emma never asked for a miracle. She didn't chase wealth or titles. All she did was choose to care on a rainy morning when no one else would. And sometimes, that's all it takes. To change not just one life, but two. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet power of compassion, don't forget to like, comment, and, most importantly, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here we share the kind of stories that heal, uplift, and remind us what it truly means to be human. We'll see you in the next one, where another soul waits to be seen.